TopMedTalk.
Welcome to part 1 of Anesthesiology 2023, the TopMedTalk Digest. This year, TopMedTalk covered the annual meeting of the American Society of Anesthesiologists, Anesthesiology 2023. We kicked off with a huge announcement right at the start of our coverage, and we'll make it again now. We're honoured to have Professor Mike Grocott join us as our co-editor-in-chief with Desiree Chappell. Mike Grocott, of course, Professor of Anesthesia and Critical Care Medicine at the University of Southampton, is no stranger to TopMedTalk. He's an NIHR senior investigator and he's an active member of evidence-based perioperative medicine, EBPOM. And you may be aware, of course, that TopMedTalk is the broadcasting arm of EBPOM. So, after we'd made that announcement, we dived into some of the most comprehensive coverage of the conference we've ever done. If you check out the podcast show notes, you'll find links to all of these pieces, and we highly recommend you listen to the full coverage. Now, artificial intelligence in anaesthesia. Mani Vindhya, Chief Medical Officer at Provation iProcedures.
Talk to us a little bit about how the AI is working within your system.
It's funny because we are medically so advanced in anesthesia, in medicine itself, but we're the last adapters of technology in medicine.
Yeah.
And it so happens that when the AI came out, medicine happens to be the first one to adapt AI. This happened exactly about a year ago, November. So it's catching on fire. So there's a lot of buzzwords going on, maybe replaces. All of those are, hype at this time, but it actually can augment in what we're doing. So if having a digital anesthetic record base will really help incorporate AI on top of it. It is actually a big blessing because you don't have to redo anything. You just have to layer on top of it. Once again, lots of abbreviations like LLMs, large language models, voice activation, and voice models out there. So I think AI is going to help augment what we're doing, both on the user interface side and also on the data side in the back end. We're just getting started in this space.
Can you give us an example of how you think that might play out, or if it's played out already?
It is in the primary care space already.
Okay.
So the notion that we have to open a computer and start documenting is going to be obsolete. You can have a conversation with the patient and the documentation could be a byproduct of it.
Yes.
So that obviously is very native for a primary care space. But can we take some elements of that one into AIM space for documentation? And more importantly, us as perioperative physicians, can we incorporate this technology into our daily clinical care? In other words, just getting a history and physical or periop journey of a patient without actually cleaning through records and records of their past medical history, past surgical history, their labs as a trend. That should be conversational within electronic medical record. So I see a step where the UI becomes much more sleeker, easier, uniform. But the bigger play is actually the data and how you can actually have a conversation with the data in terms of patient care.
So you should be able to go into a chart and type that you want to know someone's labs or something like that and say, I just want to know what their potassium was.
What's this type thing? We've just heard we can drop that.
Yes, we should take it to the next level where you actually should have a conversational analytics conversation with the data itself.
I'm so ingrained into everything as a type. I'm having a hard time making that connection. So how do you feel that, putting AI into our practice, how do we get anesthesiologists, CRNAs, everyone in this space to adopt this?
So we're always afraid that something going to replace us or number one and two, that the machine doesn't have to tell us how to practice medicine. That's not the notion here. It is here to help us practice better, make us quicker, faster decisions quickly. No technology is never replace a physician or a clinician, but it's going to make it more safer, easier. And in this environment where we have shortage of anesthetists around the world, if you look at, so we have this notion of locums and revolving door of providers coming through. They don't have to learn a new EMR. There are electronic medical records. So it should be easier. That's half the stress when you start a new job.
Sure, absolutely.
So if you can take that away by making it agnostic, where you can actually have a conversation, that would definitely help. So when you put these conveniences ahead in front, not as a replacement, I think that's going to help adapt. Anesthesia providers adapt this technology.
It should be as easy as picking up, the new cell phones that you can just, start using the minute you take it out of the box,
That's
pretty
correct.
much, right?
That is correct.
For more on that and AI integration into digital anesthesia records, check out the link in the show notes. One of the standout pieces from this year's coverage of the ASA conference is a podcast we did entitled Cost Savings Through Continuous Vital Sign Monitoring.
So this is the paper that we published earlier this year in the Journal of Medical Economics, and it was really developing a model of the expected changes in patient outcome associated with continuous monitoring in the ward environment with Portrait Mobile at the average U.S. hospital with the average number of discharges per year.
John W. Beard, Chief Medical Officer at GE Healthcare Patient Care Solutions, in conversation with Desiree Chappell.
Which I love that. Not to interrupt you, but I loved that it was in an average place. It wasn't in a huge academic facility or anything like that. It's what most of us are practicing in every day. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we built the model based on previously published data from those sources that we felt were the best conducted studies that involved similar monitored parameters as Portrait Mobile. We brought it current with today's dollar amounts from what had been published in the past and looked for opportunities and savings from length of stay on the wards, length of stay in the ICU, rapid response, in hospital cardiac arrest.
Yep.
And looked at the modeled impact of all of those outpoints associated with continuous vital sign monitoring with Portrait, and created two different implementations. One would be 50% of patients, another would be 100% of beds monitored, and determined that the cost savings would be substantial in the millions of dollars of cost avoidance, primarily through length of stay reduction. You know, even those who would be monitored with Portrait but still require that ICU stay because they deteriorated, but it was identified earlier, they ended up with a shorter length of stay, both in the ward and the unit, than in someone who got transferred to the unit without the continuous monitoring. So it suggests that those patients are arriving to the ICU, a more morbid condition, requiring additional therapy and intervention over time. This study also talks about the reduction of in-hospital cardiac arrest. There's others that address that same issue. There's going to still be rapid responses with continuous monitoring. There's still going to be some rapid responses because patients are going to need to be transferred. There's going to be patients who still deteriorate. But these technologies really have a chance of reducing the in-hospital cardiac arrest, those code blues that are getting called during shift change.
Absolutely.
Like the first time someone comes in and checks on them per routine.
Yeah.
These technologies can really make a difference there.
The piece covers patient safety, post-operative care, and wearable technology for continuous patient monitoring. Also on TopMedTalk, sustainability in anesthesia. David Havard, GE Healthcare Consultant, Clinical Assistant Professor at Michigan Medicine, in conversation with TopMedTalk.
Can we talk about like the problem for team anesthesia when it comes to sustainability?
Yeah, I think the thing that comes first to mind are the gases that we use.
Yeah.
The patients, the gases tend to get vented straight into the atmosphere.
Uh-huh.
So I think there's two main issues that come from that. One are the CO2 equivalents and the impact on the global warming cascade that we're seeing. And the second is the ozone layer and the effect that these gases have on the ozone layer. So I think you can separate those two things. There are four main gases that we use every day, or we may not use every day, but we have.
Some of us may use more than others. Yeah.
Right? And the big one is nitrous oxide. It does two things. It hangs around in the atmosphere for more than 100 years.
Oh, wow.
It's a couple hundred times worse than CO2 per unit in terms of global warming effect or CO2 equivalent. And it breaks down the ozone layer while it hangs around. So it does a couple of bad things. And we use a lot of it. If your flows are at 2 liters a minute for the whole case and you're 50% nitrous, you're using 1 liter a minute.
Yeah, that's quite a bit.
Compared to the volatile agents that we use, probably a few cc's, depending how well you're doing.
Yeah.
So the nitrous oxide story is interesting because you don't really have to use it.
Yeah.
You can just use twice as much of another agent. And so when we started to look at what we were using, we realized that we bought about 10 times more than we were giving to patients.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we kind of asked around and looked around a bit, it seems that the pipeline that we use in hospitals in general is the cause of that.
Well,
So you can lower your nitrous use if you like, but if you've got a massive tank full of nitrous attached to a pipeline that's working its way through the hospital, it's probably leaking about 90% of what you're using.
our eyebrows are all raised on that.
I've never heard that before. That's quite astonishing.
So I think I've got to pay credit to Dr. Cheeseborough here in Oregon, and he's the one that started a ton of work on this stuff. figuring out where all the leaks are. And essentially, if you just carry on doing what you're doing in nitrous, but attach a cylinder to the back and use a cylinder, you're going to cut your usage by 90%.
No kidding. So instead of piping it through the system, just keeping it in there.
Yep.
Wow. And that's where we feel like most of this is coming from. Because has there not been a movement? I know in my general practice even the last 10 years, we've pretty much stopped using nitrous. Most of providers I know don't use it anymore.
Yeah. And it's important to stop using, I think, just so you can go to the tank on the back. If you're still using it all day, every day, it's very hard to keep switching that tank out.
Yeah.
And you're just not going to be able to do that logistically. So, when we started at U of M, the first thing we targeted was nitrous. We were like, okay, what we've got to do is get the usage down to the point where we can just move away from this pipeline. So we shut the pipeline down. So the first thing we did, we're building a new hospital. It was opening 2025. We took the pipeline out of that hospital. So there was no nitrous pipeline in there. And then a few months ago, we shut off the pipeline in our cardiovascular center. And then today, they're closing it down in the main hospital, which was a great day for me.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Be 2,000 miles away.
So, in the show notes, you'll find a link to a podcast called Anesthesiology as a Career, where we discuss the staffing crisis with George W. Williams II, Chair of the ASA Committee on Critical Care Medicine and Professor of Anesthesiology at the University of Texas Health Science in Houston. Have a listen to this.
So, when we look at our staffing crises that are occurring everywhere, when we look at the fact that many of our partners are having to work early, late, post-call, pre-call, in perpetuity because of our staffing challenges, it does lead to some concerns, but it also, in a lot of ways, is an opportunity. Mm-hmm. It gives us a chance as a profession, as a specialty, to precisely determine how we can maximize our impact in a positive fashion for patient care. And because we would actually be the ones providing that guidance to determine that impact and where it would be, it gives us a great way to inject ourselves into policy leadership and protocol development for patients in the perioperative period in a way that I don't think that we've seen or expected from our specialty in recent times. So this is, it is a challenge, but on a systematic level, it actually can be. If we have the leadership, patience, and ingenuity to capture it, it can be an opportunity for our specialty.
Don't forget, of course, the links to the fuller clips and conversations that we're listening to here are all available in the show notes, and we implore you to have a listen to some of those conversations. Moving on from that piece to our piece now with Jonathan Gall, Vice Chair of the ASA Committee on Economics. Here we cover alternative payment models, bundled payments, value-based care, and leveraging data to improve surgical outcomes.
How has COVID affected all of these things?
At least at the governmental payer level with CMS, they really suspended a lot of the penalty stuff. Mm-hmm. And some of the bonuses wound up also being suspended too. You could give COVID hardships, so to speak, for the reporting and things like that. So it slowed a lot of things down, at least for a year or so. But come 2022, we're only a few months away from that. It's all back on board again. They're pushing all the accountable care organizations. Most of them had been upside only. Now they're making it mandatory that you have to shift into downside risk too. And so my own accountable care organizations, most of the ones that providers here are involved in, are all shifting to that downside risk model now too. And so the penalties are going to be more aggressive as they come along. So they are forcing it on us.
Gotcha. Go ahead, Saul. You have one?
Just to the COVID point, I wanted John to speak to. This is a what do you think question. Obviously, the math is the math, and the means to pay for healthcare is still a reality. What do you think? This is the what do you think part of it. Is going to be the likely consequence to the world when we recover from COVID and we have to pay, our debts.
Wow. Hopefully it doesn't fall on the backs of anesthesiologists.
How can anesthesiology best ensure that it doesn't?
Well, we've done an amazing job trying to show our value during this whole pandemic, right? We couldn't have gotten through it without our specialty at the front lines. And ASA has done an amazing job making sure that message has gotten out there, and we continue to echo it over and over again. And I think that's crucial. If you're talking to your C-suite, if you're talking to your legislator, if you're talking to anybody, you got to make sure to echo that once more.
It's a really good point, Jonathan. We've been on the front lines. And,
yeah.
Yeah, holding it down.
One last tiny thing.
Oh, okay.
This kind of goes to everyone to a certain extent. When we're having these conversations, do you think that all clinicians, as part of their qualification, should have to do Health Economics 1.0? Because it's not clear that we do have to.
I think it's crucial.
Yeah.
We practice it in our residency. We've been doing practice management oriented in business of medicine, CME and lectures and resident talks, whatever, for years now. And I continue to do them along with my chairman and many others within our department for our department. And I believe that it should be a focus. And I know ASA is making some emphasis on this as well. That anesthesiologists, other specialties, sure. If they want to get left behind, go for it. But anesthesiologists across this country really need to understand this sort of stuff.
Also on TopMedTalk, this episode, physician payments and Medicare. On the subject of AI, or perhaps more accurately, augmented intelligence, Rick Dutton, Chief Quality Officer of US Anesthesia Partners.
You just touched on it, like how to make our anesthesia clinicians, those who are taking care of patients every day, smarter. And how do we integrate this technology? Because that is, it's similar to what we've been talking about, but it's really taking it to the next level.
Yeah, and right now the concept of machine learning or AI in our monitors is very scary to a lot of people, including our FDA on the regulatory side. But in fact, it just needs to be and will be completely baked in and invisible to us, right? So when I started in medicine, if I wanted a hematocrit, I went to the lab and put blood in a centrifuge and spun it and looked at the hematocrit, right? And now I don't do that anymore. And when I was a kid and you stepped on the brake pedal, there was a mechanical connection to the wheels of your car that made it stop. And that hasn't been true for 20 years now. When I step on the brakes, a computer decides how much brake force to apply to the wheels of my car, right? So it's all...
Or if you don't step on the brake, it actually stops the car for you.
Today, it stops the car anyway, whether I step on the brake or not. Exactly right. So this will become normal background in the OR as our monitors talking to each other and giving you a synthesized opinion about anesthetic depth and fluid status and, risk factors for lots of different things. State of blockade will be part of that. And making specific recommendations to me.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe the generation after that, it'll give the rocuronium.
I was just to say, it'll be a closed loop or actually an open loop system that it says this is what your train of 4 is and this is the amount of reversal that you need to give. Or you need to keep your patient at this level of block. And so then at the end, we'll reverse it for you.
Yeah, exactly. I'll just tell it, keep the person relaxed.
Yeah. And then we're done. So
I won't even have to say that because it'll be looking at the feed from the laparoscope, and when the camera comes out, it'll reverse the patient on its own. Why should I have to make that decision? That one's easy.
I will be able to read the newspaper during the case then.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll set it up so it's read to you.
Listen.
Now for Michael Champeau on the subject of being a perioperative practitioner. He is, of course, the outgoing president of the American Society of Anesthesiologists. Have a listen to what he had to say.
Well, we as an organization, we feel very strongly that perioperative medicine is a very important part of the future. And of course, we just came an hour ago from our Robenstein lecture where Dr. Sessler, who I've known for over 40 years, gave a very compelling presentation of why anesthesiology needs to embrace postoperative care more fully. I think when we look at perioperative medicine, all of us understand that we have gotten the intraoperative part to a point where it's remarkably safe. The advances of the last 30, 40 years have improved the safety of the intraoperative care dramatically. I think in the last 10, 15 years, we've made big improvements in preoperative optimization, preparing people, getting them in the best shape possible for their surgery. So we've made great progress on that. The postoperative piece is missing. That's where the mortality is. Postoperative mortality is strikingly high still for hospital inpatients. There's a lot of good to be done there. And I think that Dan's message this morning was spot on in terms of an area that needs our attention and one in which we can demonstrate the value. We have a new center that we've developed.
I was going to say, hasn't there been a new center developed for that?
There has been.
Yeah.
We've been working on this for years, and just organically within the organization for many years, we had a perioperative surgical home steering committee. We identified that concept of the perioperative surgical home, which was different words, but the same concept of looking at the entire perioperative period from the decision to operate until recovery. But we had that group working. Then we also had a committee on perioperative medicine, which was focused more on identifying what the curriculum might be for a fellowship in postoperative medicine. We realized we needed to kind of pull all of these people together. And so this year we created a new Center for Perioperative Medicine led by Maxime Cannison from UCLA now, but of course internationally known, extraordinarily well connected throughout the world, and a recognized expert in perioperative medicine. So I was thrilled that he agreed to take this on for us, pulling together the existing work done by TJ Gann and Rob Shekar with our other things. So we're really trying to make a real concerted push in that area.
And on that note, part one of this digest comes to a conclusion. We will be returning to our coverage of anesthesiology next week when we have a look at some of the other pieces that we had. In the meantime, of course, you can check out all of those episodes right now here on TopMedTalk.
TopMedTalk.
Thanks for downloading TopMedTalk. Don't forget to subscribe via your podcatcher. Don't forget to check us out on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And also, don't forget, TopMedTalk is the broadcasting arm of EBPOM, Evidence-Based Perioperative Medicine. We'd love you to find out more about that. If you check out ebpom.org, you can find low prices on some of the conferences we're organising around the world. Many of them are virtual and don't even involve you leaving your own home. Check out ebpom.org now.